requesting radio stations and the Kenosha News. Purpose of the meeting is to discuss the agenda review for the upcoming board meeting. Will you stand for the pledge? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schmeling.
Here.
Ms. Adams.
Here.
Mr. Price.
Here.
Mr. Tierney.
Here.
Mrs. Landry.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mrs. Motter.
Here. Okay, we start with the organizational meeting. I'm going to make a bit of a change on the agenda. There was a oh, okay. All right. We're going to start with the legal services for the district. Okay.
Thank you. At the organizational meeting, this is where we approve the law firms that the district will work with. There is no change on this list of law firms from this year to next year. It's the same groups. So really just carrying that forward.
And authorized public depositories. Tarek?
Hello. This is another kind of housekeeping item. Every year by policy 3310, the board approves where we can deposit and hold our funds because we do operate with public funds. We don't have any changes, so we will continue on with, if you see in attachment A, Johnson Bank is our primary bank. That's where we do most of our banking. And then we do have our other ancillary pieces where we have investments, we have some of the health insurance related items like our HSA and FSA accounts. Those are all considered depositories because we send them money. And along with this report is the emergency line of credit authorization. You'll see that in the report. That's the standard $2 million emergency line of credit. Think of that as like overdraft protection for us. So that would be in the case of an absolute emergency where we had to make a payroll and funds are short on hand, we would take advantage of this emergency line of credit. We have never had to do that in my time here. It's just one more kind of layer of safety for us.
Thank you. School board representative to serve as delegate at the CISA, Dr. Price. You've done that in the past?
I have.
Will you be doing it in the future?
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, thank you. All right, that brings us to the agenda review, regular school board meeting stuff, all the rest. And under this, I'd like to bring forward something that was brought up sort of at the, well, not really at the last minute, because in March, I received requests to put it on the agenda, but then that didn't work out. We have now a copy of a safe haven resolution that I'm going to pass out to consider for the agenda for April.
Okay.
Just the board members. Yeah. Okay, just a brief introduction. A number of board members wanted this on the agenda. We did agree to put it on the April agenda, and Mrs. Adams participated just recently in a very lengthy meeting with a number of stakeholders to discuss this, and so I'd like her to talk about that.
Okay, there may be other board members that want to speak to this because I was not the originator of the original resolution. That was 5 pages long. I just reviewed it and called together a group, what I called a work group with some Hispanic representatives on it that included Juan Torres, Ray Palacios from LULAC, Forward Latino had a representative, and we had Maria Villalobos, who's working with students. Juan Torres having been an administrator that retired, I think it's been about 2 years ago. So the resolution originally, as I stated, was 5 pages long. I'm not going to take any credit for the language because I just reviewed it and we shortened it to a one-page resolution. But I want to thank the originators of the original Safe Haven resolution. It was excellent. It was just a little lengthy, and we broke it into 2 parts, one being a resolution, and the second part to come later will be working on helping the district with a policy and some procedures. So having said that, I know, Ms. Landry, you were part of trying to present a resolution at the last month. So I don't know if you want to speak to this, but this is the product of a 2-hour meeting where we simplified it, but consider it very, very important that this district do something to calm the fears of some of the parents of students in our district and letting them know that we take this seriously as a board and that we're going to continue working on some procedures to follow should there be any representatives from ICE or any of the other agencies that may come and try to get on non-public property here at the district. And, you know, what do you do when that happens? So that's all going to come later. And administration, of course, will be asked to create the policy. But this is the resolution. So I don't know if you've had time to read it, but we are asking that this be put on the April board meeting, April 29th, on the agenda for discussion and action.
Oh, is it okay if I? Yeah. So I was just, I appreciate Ms. Landry bringing this to our attention, and we all received emails. And my question would be actually for our administration is, to what degree have we had conversations with the sheriff and law enforcement, and what is their because I'm sure they're concerned about these issues too, and I just thought it would be a good idea for us to have a cross conversation. So I guess that's for you, Superintendent Jeff.
Yep. So we've had very limited conversations, I would say, regarding this issue. When I received the first draft of the resolution, I did schedule a call with our legal for exec session to discuss some of some of the potential legal considerations, litigious considerations of it. But we have had some conversations with our with local law enforcement about what we would do, and I know that Bill was part of those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, we have policy in terms of how we interact with law enforcement. There hasn't been the conversation was that we don't have any indication that somebody's coming to a school to take someone out of school or something like that. We've given some guidance to our principals in terms of how they should respond, which is to follow policy but it's been very, as you said, there hasn't been much chatter about it other than concern from parents.
Dr. Haithcock, what's the procedure if someone has been notified or a school finds out or someone comes to a school wanting to take a child out.
Actually, I have another scenario
Oh.
because I think I got a specific one. So in the event a guardian, parent or otherwise is picked up, that's the more likely scenario. This has happened in a few places. I've been in some state organizations, less so the student, but more so the parent or a guardian is picked up, and we probably have some policies in relationship to a parent being arrested, but this is a bit different. So to what degree are our policies? And I'm plead ignorance. I'm not sure exactly what.
Yeah, I think we would normally deal with like DCFS if a parent got picked up, but if law enforcement comes in, whether it's KPD or whoever it is, like we don't have any indication that anybody's coming for this purpose that we're talking about, but how we respond to law enforcement is the same across different agencies. Did that answer your question?
What is the response? What do you do if law enforcement comes to the office or to a teacher's classroom or whatever? What happens next?
If law enforcement, if a state agency is going to take a student, they would do that. They come in, we contact the family right away, let them know what's happening. I don't picture that happening.
Yeah,
But-
we would check for, at the buildings, they would check, and this guidance went out to check for any,
There's supposed to be like a subpoena
Warrant,
that comes
yeah.
with them. There would have to be a warrant or a subpoena for us to they would have to provide that to us. We would check for that.
And they would wait in the office
That's correct.
and not go throughout the building or anything until that's happened, and probably Dr. Weiss would be notified?
We would be notified in my office. They're directed right now to call us, and yes, we would be involved.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a lot of education that needs to be had around compliance and non-compliance and administrative warrant versus a judicial warrant. With the judicial warrant where you must comply, but with the administrative warrant, you're not mandated to comply until they come back with a signed judicial warrant. So there's a lot of education that's needed. And the fear is that just because they haven't come to Kenosha Unified or the Kenosha schools yet does not mean they're not coming. We're just much smaller than some of the bigger cities where they've already gone. I believe they'll eventually come here. So, we need to be prepared for that. We need to, our building principals or our ESC staff needs to know, what do you do when they come? If they come and try to if they try to detain or try to just ask questions about citizenship, what do they do? So we really do need to be all in agreement on what you do and what you don't do. And I think that will calm the fears of the parents and and the staff, because you have to be up on this to know, what you should not do. We need to get student records. We need to encourage that their records be updated so that they have some contacts other than parents. If we need to call a parent and the parent is the one that's getting detained or they're interviewing them, we need to have another, or we need to ask the parents, is there someone else? So we have a lot of work to do, and we have a group of volunteers that's willing to help out, and that's kind of part two, where we start with the policy. We have a group of volunteers that are willing to become the experts in this, so that there's a list of volunteers that you can call if you need to, and they can come to interpretation and translation services. I'm a little concerned because we just lost our our main family liaison here in the last week, and I think we're going to prove that at the next board meeting. We lost Juan Torres when he was here. You know, we're losing the bilingual individuals, employees that would work with these families. So now, you know, everyone else needs to know what to do. So that's coming later, you know, on the agenda for April 29th would just be the resolution saying we support the need to start talking about this. We support the need to create a policy and some, you know, new policy and designate, you know, responsibilities. So I'm just hoping that this is something that board members can support, a resolution saying we do support the need to get prepared and educate everyone on the do's and don'ts should ICE, Border Patrol, any law enforcement come for a student asking information about a student, or trying to detain a parent when they're in a parking lot, or when they're at the door before they come into the building. You know, we need to be prepared. So I'm hoping that that follows the resolution maybe at a later date.
Thank you. Mrs. Tyndall, did you have something to add?
I would just add that we do have some guidance actions that we have set forth between leadership here that has been communicated to schools. And if an incident happens, the direct communication to school leadership, to Dr. Weiss, is the directive. And we do have some actions if somebody were to present, some protocols on taking picture ID, making sure they have a judicial warrant, those types of things, and then waiting for some guidance from Dr. Weiss's office or school leadership's office. But you are correct, we need to continuously revisit that because things are ever evolving and we can always do better communicating those pieces.
Oh, Wendy, can we get a copy of that for the board just before the next meeting?
Yeah, yes.
Excellent. Okay, so I actually had more than 4 board members wanting to see this on the April resolution, so I don't see any problem with this, and I think we can move on. Oh, yes.
I'd just like to make a comment, an observation of if a parent is taken to, and the plans that we would be aware of so that we could support that for a child that might not have a parent when they go home. So I think that's really important to make sure that some way the communication, and I know you guys communicate with the Kenosha Police all the time, but just maybe just kind of
Yeah,
prepping
most of our
and
students
sharing
have.
the information so that when somebody asks us about it, we have the answer.
Yeah, most of our students have additional emergency contacts on their Infinite Campus page that we would go to. When you go through a student, you see emergency contact 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes up to 6 even. So we would
Sometimes
be
those go
contacting
out of
them.
date too.
If a
So
parent wasn't answering, we would start calling the next emergency contacts.
yeah, and maybe, I mean that's something that maybe if they can kind of take a look at too, because I know that changes over the years too. So it's over a year, it can change. So kind of just shoring that up and reassuring people that, you know, we have that plan in place. And I think it's a communication piece, really.
Okay, on to old business, capital projects.
Good afternoon. Pat and I are here to go over the 25-26 capital plan. We've put together kind of a presentation that'll explain what our policies are or what our methods are for coming up with projects. Just to kind of review the capital plan that was submitted to you guys. Just to recap, the major maintenance budget has been reduced by $1 million as of last year's fiscal year. And we are, working off a $1 million budget plus $500,000 that we have from savings from energy projects over the course of some years. We've been allotted a portion of that money to apply to major maintenance. We also have a contingency within the major maintenance plan. Allowed in the policy is 5%. We have a 4% contingency in this budget. Just to kind of run through some of the projects quickly that aren't going to be represented in the PowerPoint. We are doing exterior envelope projects, which include a roof project at Whittier. We're also looking at doing a wall restoration project at Grant School. We're also working on exterior door replacement projects at various schools. For some are safety concerns, other are issues with trip hazards or worn out conditions that just need attention and replacement in this budget. We're also going to be doing some asphalt work at Indian Trail, which is a continuation of a project we started last year. And I'll get to that in the PowerPoint a little bit to kind of show you how we evaluated that particular project. And then we're also going to be looking at a project at Mahone Middle School. Again, it's kind of a safety, and it also is going to help some of the drop-off area congestion and alleviate a little bit of pedestrian car traffic issues within that project. We also do LED lighting projects. That's a continuation of several years of replacing fluorescent light bulbs in various buildings to new LED fixtures. And then in the end, we are going to be doing, we have proposed a carpet replacement project at, which is now Kenosha School of Language. I always refer to it as Stoker. I'm still getting used to all the new names. But, you know, we say it's a 32-year-old carpet that we're replacing, but it's also one of our newer schools. So, I mean, you can see that our buildings have aged since I've been here, and, you know, the new, what's old or what's new is now old in the realm of replacement things that need to be done. So with that, we could start the planning. We're going to go over asphalt. Just quick flip back if you can. We're going over asphalt projects and the planning that comes in that, roofing, and then Pat will refer to some of the HVAC work we've done over the last 10 years. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. So to evaluate asphalt projects, we kind of put a total number of our total asset in dollar value. We have about $36 million worth of asset in asphalt. And at 30 schools, the total hardscape areas we have, and I'll allude to that in the next slide, but we deal with parking lots, we have roadways, we have sidewalks, and if you aggregate all those together, we have 171 areas that we identify within the district that all fall under, let's say, asphalt or concrete repairs or replacements. And then we use a rating system. We've worked with a consultant, SEG, which is a engineering company that specializes in servicing restorations. And they've come up, or they use a rating system that the University of Wisconsin has developed. And it's kind of the national standard now for a lot of states even to rate pavements throughout a campus or a facility or multiple facilities like ours. And just to kind of give you a sense of how it works, a Paiser 1 is like worst case scenario, and a Paiser 10 is very good, like brand new surfaces. So I'll show you kind of how we determine that with the project we have currently. So you can switch to the next slide, please. So this is in fact Indian Trail High School. Area A right here is the project we're proposing. The area in yellow was replaced last year, and the area in blue is going to be the proposed area this year. I've also highlighted other parking lots within that campus, let's say. So on the right here is a list of all of the square footage of asphalt. So just Indian Trail alone has almost 661,000 square feet of asphalt. And the area that we're working in right here is in area A, and that lot is 207,000 square feet of that. So it's almost, you know, almost a third of what the overall parking lot square footage is. I'm not including roadways, which is also the perimeter around the building and some internal roads as well. So that number is in the 600,000, but as you can see, we have multiple parking lots, and to address that magnitude of a large project like that, you almost have to break it down into multiple years because of the costs associated with something that large. Okay, you can go to the next slide, please. So this is the parking lot that we are working in. Over the years, this is the oldest parking lot at Indian Trails, built in 1995 when the original building was constructed. In 2008, we added almost 2/3 more square footage to that building, and it surrounded the original building. But again, this parking lot was back from 1995. the property that this is on a big fill site. Everything slopes to the west from east to west. So a lot of this property, as the building was built, they pushed the topsoil and all the spoils onto where this parking lot became. So over the years, as the property settled and water continues to trickle down all the way to the stadium and into the retention basin on the west side of Mahone, you start to develop water that is under the ground here, and it just lends itself to freeze-thaw cycles, standing water. And we did some soil borings out there 2 years ago and found out that the water content or the moisture content beneath the pavement is pretty significant. So we said we want to redo this parking lot, but to just come over and overlay with another whole asphalt overlay or replacement, while it would look good for a while, there's no drainage yet. So what this project is accomplishing, if you go to the next slide, we are coming in here and we're putting an all new drain tile around the entire perimeter of the parking lot. And it's all being tied into existing catch basins. And now we're giving the water a place to relieve itself and then dry that site out. So one good thing about this, you can see now that this is kind of that same roadway. So we're actually repairing a lot of the bad areas by doing this. And that could buy us more time here because of the magnitude of other projects we have in the future. And to let this drain tile do its work, sitting a year or two more or even longer will really help dry that site out. So we're hoping that by doing this and continuing this project, we can extend the life of that parking lot maybe a little bit more before we do another piecemeal approach to replace the whole thing. So that's kind of a recap of how we evaluate using the PASER rating that we use to evaluate all of our parking lots throughout the district. And you can see by the number, the high amount of replacement value. So the next slide, go ahead, is same thing for roofing. We also have a database of roofing projects, or all of our roofing square footage. So we have 2,171 square feet of roof area in the district at a value of about $66 million. And just to kind of give you an example of roof areas and how that all comes into play. If you think of your house and you say, I'm going to do a roof replacement, you may have your main house, a garage, and maybe you got like a porch or something. You got 3 roof areas technically you would consider. But a lot of people say, well, I'm just going to replace the roof of my house. They think it's the whole house. Maybe not. So at Bradford, just to give you an example, we have 35 roof areas encompassing the planetarium, the gym, the auditorium. And then you got to think that that building was built in probably 4 different phases. There's different roof heights. There's different roof materials. So this diagram in here, in all those gold boxes, are how many roof areas are just at Bradford High School. And high schools in general are going to be our biggest roof area projects because of their size and the different varying components of a roof that make up the overall. So just to give you a sense of magnitude on a high school. If you go to the next slide, this is Whittier project right now. And this is the original roof to the addition from 1991. What's going on in this roof right now is due to its age and over time, this is a single ply membrane roof with a ballasted gravel on top of it. As roofs age, they tend to lose a lot of their pliability and they shrink. So you can see right here that this is our consultant. He was able to just pull back the roof edge very easily because it has come out from the coping that's the gravel stop that's right here. And this is nothing ordinary or extraordinary to this building. We did repairs at Stoker just last year. Within a year, all of a sudden, all the coping started. The tension was so good, it started pulling the coping actually off the building. Here, the membrane came out from under that. So, again, the roof membrane has seen a useful life. 30 years out of a single ply membrane roof is pretty good. They're only warranted for 20 unless you go to some extraordinary thicknesses or some different detailing on roofs. So we've got our money's worth out of this roof, and that's why we're going to be targeting this building for replacement this year. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think I'm up with HVAC, but before I do, I just want one thing on roofs. So I started at Unified in 2000, and when I started in Mrs. Adams was on the board at the time. One of my, some of us just stick around. But one of the things that my pitch at the time I came to the district was KUSD had not replaced a roof section in our district in, it was like 3.5 years. And I talked to the board at that time and just said, this is something we have to do every year, whether it excites people or not. It's a thing that we kind of have to keep up with because of that. $66 million is a huge sum of money. And if we don't just stick at it, now we were lucky. We got revenue limit exemption money over about a five-year period. And so we had a nice stretch there where we did a lot of roofs. And so that kind of set us up to kind of cover, the fact that we weren't keeping up with everything that we wanted to do. We made the pitch that if we could do about $1 million worth of roof work every year, that would be our way of keeping up with things. Well, that just wasn't realistic. And so we've probably done more like 500,000 to maybe on a good year, 750,000. That RLE money kind of got us through that. But what John is talking about here is this Whittier roof is the next one in the list. It's 34 years old. And one of the things that we thought we might do is at the June committee meeting, we've done this in the past. Historically, I've kind of presented some of these databases and how we weigh one project out versus another. And maybe we'll do a deeper dive into why Whittier versus Bradford or something like that. But I just wanted to just kind of chime in on that. Now we go to HVAC, Chris. The positive, so, we talk about all of this, asphalt and roofing that, is just kind of hanging over our heads. The positive is HVAC. HVAC was the one that was really hanging over our heads up until 10 years ago. We had about $64 million worth of HVAC things that were just out there. And it was like, well, when are we ever going to get that kind of money? And then the revenue limit exemption opportunity presented itself, and then after that ESSER followed up with that. And so over the course of the last 10 years, we've made a significant investment in our HVAC systems in the district. And so I do have some tables in this presentation, and I think through Denise we can send those tables out to the board members so you can see that. But maybe we just click ahead a couple slides. Click ahead one more, Chris. There, those are the tables I have, and in there it just goes school by school, and it gives you some basic information about the system. So in this case it's the boiler plant at each school, and the next page it's the chiller plant, but it'll show you that the year that we installed that equipment. And so you'll see that over the last 10 years, we've replaced, probably 70% of the heavy expense stuff. Can we go back one slide, Chris? And this is my last little pitch on this. It doesn't mean that, HVAC is, done and we'll never have to think about it again. We've bought ourselves a boatload of time, but there's still some things out there. We've got a few older boilers left. We've got, at some point, we'll talk, about the fact that we still have 6 schools that don't have central air conditioning. And I highlighted those on the page with chillers. And then, through all of these projects we've done the last 10 years, we've been putting our control systems on the same platform, which is Tritium. And we still have a handful of schools that are not on that. That is fine for now, but at some point, getting all of the schools on one system has kind of been a goal. We're lucky we have some really experienced HVAC technicians in our department, but when they retire, we're going to probably need to get those last handful of schools. So all we wanted to do here was, I think what John had fed back to me, I was, on vacation 2 weeks ago when you guys last met. Some folks had some questions. How do you come up with the projects that you're presenting to us? And I think that's a great question. How we come up with them is that we have these databases that we've put together over the course of the last couple decades, and we have inspections that feed into that information, and then we have our work order system feeds into that, and then we get feedback from our maintenance crews, and then our own evaluations. And I think one of the things that I guess I hope we leave you with here today is that we've got this kind of very detailed and I think comprehensive evaluation, and we have systems for everything. So simple things like flooring to complex things like roofing, and those are the things that the two of us have looked at over the years to make those decisions as to what we bring forward and ask funding for. And I think there's I think having those systems in place, I guess my hope is that gives people comfort that we're spending that money wisely, that we're protecting the investment of the buildings. And I guess if there's any questions, we'd be glad to answer.
Questions for Pat? Yolanda?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to make a recommendation on the proposed recommendation after any questions.
This is just for, this is
We
an
don't
item
have to,
of-
this will be,
I'm just going to comment on it. That's
yes.
all. Yeah, just for the board meeting, if we could, and I know we're not doing it tonight because there's no action here,
Mhm.
but I would just recommend that we put the amounts in there, something to the tune of that the board's approving the $1 million plus the annual supplement of the additional $500,000 from the utilities energy budget, just to make it clear in that motion the amount of money that's being approved.
We will do that.
Thank you.
Mrs. Stevens?
And just like having that, I think is a good idea to have the presentation, because then people can really wrap their heads around it.
Yeah, and we don't know, give us feedback as to what we wanted to do this for you folks tonight. Our plan on in 2 weeks was really just to answer questions, but we can do whatever. I thought like the June committee meeting might be an opportunity to take this, but maybe go deeper as to how we do things. Like I say, we've done that in the past, but I think there's so many new folks that are involved in the district that, I think, and so, we'll probably, I may even, put out through Dr. Weiss, here's, 7, 8 different types of projects. Tell us which ones you'd like us to dive into in that June meeting, and so we can do that for folks. And I think that, but anyway.
As far as photos go, the photo of the parking lot at Indian Trail, it's worth 1,000 words right there.
We always have done the photo before and after photos after projects. I do that every year. Like in October, I show you what your money got you. But we can
It shows the need.
we can absolutely add those. We can add some photos to the report for 2 weeks from now as well. You bet.
Anything else? Yes, Bob?
Would it be so, Frank, that we just tore out their playground because it was too unsafe for them to use? And I was talking to them, we have to fundraise to get playgrounds replaced. Is there any possible way we could consider that like an emergency and maybe take whatever that cost would be out of this fund? You know what I mean? Like if it was 1.5 and the playground's $100,000, then you only get $100,000 less, but you put it in that playground because we just right-sized all the schools, and then you tear down one of the playgrounds. It's a neighborhood playground. It's, to me, that's an emergency. Those kids need somewhere to go play. And I was talking to the principal, and to fundraise that money, they've been trying, and it's not an area that has a lot of extra cash. It's hard to fundraise $180,000 or whatever. You know what I mean?
I'll let Dr. Weiss
Dr.
start.
Weiss can answer that.
Yeah. So, just some background. The playground equipment at Frank was unsafe, and there was a concern about people from the neighborhood playing on who weren't at Frank to know that it was unsafe. So it was removed. One of the ideas that I'd like to see, so historically the district hasn't paid for any playground equipment. That's all been fundraising, PTO. PTOs have done that. One thing that I think would that we should take a look at And this is this is new. This is hot off the press as of like yesterday. I think I had this conversation with folks, or maybe even this morning. Was potentially coming up with a baseline for what all playgrounds in the district should have, and if there is a special, if we need to use reserves or if we need to use one-time money for that, potentially anything we get from revenue from selling properties in the district, we could use to fund that for a one-time expense and establish a baseline. Then there will be PTOs that if they want to raise above that, that's absolutely their prerogative to do so. But establishing, as you mentioned, Mr. Tierney, with we do have other schools that are struggling to get their PTOs and are having a very difficult time raising funds. So that, I think that would be a good conversation to have at an upcoming board meeting. My concern with Frank is a bit of the timeline. I know that we've got, to be able to hit this school year, we will be able to move some equipment over for those smaller students, the younger students rather, some of the Head Start, and Rhonda can speak to that. But for the older grades, we really don't have anything for them now, and we'd have to order it. And by the time it gets put in, I'm afraid that the school year may be over. But if we did come up with I think coming up with a standard through the district that we fund with a one-time payment is something that we should look into. That's something I would encourage us to look into. And I don't know, like I said, this is relatively hot off the press, but thanks for bringing that up, because I do think it's part of the discussion.
All right, thank you. And then I just had one more question about we pay over 25 grand a piece for a door to get installed. There's 4 doors at $105,000.
It's the door frames and the installation cost, but it's not just a door. It's it's a set of doors. And then what we do for exterior doors is we put in. So one of the challenges that you have in a public building is we have to salt at a whole different level than any of us would do at our homes because of the liability of slip and falls. And so metal doors, steel doors they're just not good decisions in exterior. So we put in what they call special light doors. And so like most of our schools, if you see all of the newer doors that we've put in the last, 15 years, something like that, it's a composite door. They are indeed quite pricey. And so it's not just the door though, it's the frame, and so there's actually masonry work that goes in.
So I can go through that.
You could pick an example and just
So like Ruth, there we're replacing 4 exterior doors at entry number 10. It's the historic building, so there is some additional cost that'll be there. We have to actually cut out the frame that's there because I can't remove the original historic portion of the framework, so it's going to be a little bit more complicated. It's almost like a custom job to get that one replaced. At Curtis Strange, the kindergarten doors, there's actually 2 sets of doors that feed from the 2 flanking kindergarten rooms. There's side lights on them. There's also light and transom above. So it's not like I'm just going to take a door off. It's the frame, it's the removal and stuff like that.
and then these are hard bid projects. We'll get 3 to 5 bids and they'll come in right on, they'll come in and that I mean, so it seems like a boatload of money, and it truly is, but in the end, what we've done by going to special light doors, and I think pretty much every school in the upper Midwest has went to there's multiple manufacturers, but have went to that product because of the salt use is it just the doors and frames on steel doors just deteriorate. You can put in a steel door and in 3 years it can already be deteriorating. It's just a reality of what we have to do to prevent slip and falls and the liability from those injuries.
Mrs. Adams?
Yeah,
Sorry,
just a
Patrick.
quick thought. Tarek, the Fund 80 for the community funds, I know we were able to put a roof on the senior center. That can't be used for the playground equipment since the public does use it at every school now?
No, that's not an allowed cost.
Okay, all right, thank you.
The only thing I could add on the playground stuff, you know, that was a decision made actually, I think it predates me by about 5 or 6 years in the district. And it was when we went to, they called it site-based management, and there were decisions made as to what was going to be funded at the district level and what was funded at the school level, and equipment went to departments and schools, whether that made sense or not. And so playground equipment fell under that category. And so it's been that way for like 30 years. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it at all. I'm just saying that's the way it's been. And so that's been the rule that we've followed. And so I think to Dr. Weiss's point, it's certainly this current school board has the prerogative to say we want to do something different. You know, the fact that somebody made that decision 30 some years ago doesn't mean we have to continue to follow that.
Mrs. Landry?
Is that something we'd need a policy change for?
I wouldn't call it a policy.
Oh,
It'd
no,
be more like a budget
Yeah.
assumption kind of thing, or even it wouldn't be necessarily built into the budget. There's multiple ways you can do it. I'd say have a board discussion. If you want to do one-time use of approved funds, like from reserves, that's an option. An option is to build in a standing line item that says do $200,000 worth of playgrounds a year. Pick your priorities. You can tack it on to major maintenance, whatever. There's multiple options.
I
don't
really
think it's
like
policy.
Dr. Weiss's idea, though, about setting some sort of standard and saying, you know, because otherwise it could just be where you get inundated with requests from schools that I want to add this and I want to add that. And so having something that, I don't think the goal is to have, the greatest playground set at every school. I think the goal is to have a quality playground set at every school. And so I think having some sort of standard makes perfect sense to me. Minimum standard, however you want to term it.
Okay.
How soon can we have those discussions?
I think we have got to get information first, and
Okay.
they're getting it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, if that's something we could shoot to have that. Let me work and find out how long that would take. Definitely by the beginning of next school year, I'd like to see that. But that'd be the goal. But I'd have to find out. We need to talk about it. Like I said, this is this is a relatively new topic that we're looking at, so we need to spend some time.
And then one thing that I can share with Dr. Weiss that he could share with the board is I did put together a playground guideline document about 4 or 5 years ago. Sue Valeri and I put that together. And my goal before retirement is to update that. John's been doing some research for me on some different things that I wanted to update in that. And so I think certainly in the next 2 months, I'm going to get that updated, and that would be something that would be maybe a resource to the board. I put it together for principals, to help them as they were trying to find their way through those projects, because there's so many rules with playgrounds as far as age, what's age appropriate, and then ADA accessibility. And so I think it's a pretty good document, but it needs an update. And so I've been planning on doing that here before I retire.
think we'll dive into deeper details, but also there's a issue of grandfathering in, right? There's some pieces that are currently allowed, but if we tinker with them,
If you modify the system, yeah. And we're getting to where we're getting more and more comfortable with that. And our insurance company's getting more and more comfortable with that, and how to, I'm not going to say work the system, but make the system work for us. When some of the laws first kind of came out, they seemed daunting. Like we're never going to do another playground set again because of the requirements. But now that we've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, we feel really a lot more comfortable. It's not as bad as it once was thought to be. It's still very costly. And so for schools that don't have, active PTA, PTOs, it seems like an impossible task. you know.
Okay, I'm going to just exert a bit of presidential privilege here so that we can move on. We have someone waiting to talk to us at 6:30 virtually in executive session, so we have to get through the rest of this. So thank you, and we're moving on to the goal setting, which is old business.
Yes, so last month or so, we had a WASB representative come in and go over the board survey. And out of that survey, each board member created goals. And the hope is that the purpose of that was to develop some board goals. So around the room, if in your packet, on page 12 and 13 are the board goals. And you'll notice around the room, there are the strategic objectives for each one of those. And my thought to narrow down those multiple goals into the top 2 or 3 that the board wants to vote on and adopt at the next meeting, that we would do some forced choice voting, which basically means I'm going to give you 3 Post-its and put your Post-it on the 3 goals that you would like to see move forward to be approved or for discussion, potential approval at the next board meeting. So there on the bottom of each one as well is the goal area. So culture, planning, and board operations are the 3 big ones, I believe. So I will go around and give everybody 3 mini Post-it notes so that they can begin, so that you can begin voting on your top 3. And this should, I'm thinking 5 or 10 minutes for this. Sorry. Uh, all right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I will take those down and bring forward the top 2 or 3 goals for our meeting on the 29th. And next, I believe we have Head Start.
Yeah, thanks. Rhonda and Michelle, if you want to come up just in case discussion comes up, I'll explain what we're doing here with this report. We're doing this, it's a corrective action plan because of an unsafe event that happened over at Chavez. What happened was the kids were out on the playground. It started to rain. We tried to bring the kids inside. There was a student that was reluctant to come inside. And then we had an inappropriate handling of that behavioral incident where we grabbed a kid by the arm, carried the kid in a way that we wouldn't be approved to carry a kid in, set him down in a chair. And so that was a staff member reported it to administration. The parent was notified. The child wasn't injured. The parent didn't want to make a complaint, but we reported ourselves as we were required to do to the administration here at KUSD and to the regional Head Start office. And after they investigated it, the school was assigned with a non-compliance ruling requiring the school to complete this corrective action plan that's laid out that we're presenting here. And so the Head Start board that you guys have, the leadership team, has approved this, and it needs KUSD board approval too, which we needed to be in place by June 6th. Is that right? I remember.
We have to complete the whole plan and present the evidence that we've completed the plan to Head Start by June 6th.
Okay, thank you. The goal of the plan is to ensure that a behavior like this isn't likely to happen again, or an incident like this isn't likely to happen again. So the plan includes these specific actions: appropriate supervision of students, especially during transition times like coming in and out or moving from class to class, immediate retraining on safety procedures. We are increasing, we normally do 1 time, we're going to do 3 times where we'll officially document monitoring of safety procedures at the school. And the plan includes moving forward documented monitoring of health and safety procedures for new staff. Attachments that you have there include attachment A is the Head Start performance report. That explains the incident and what happened. And so, you know, I told it to you. Attachment B is the 120-day corrective action plan that we created. That includes clarifying roles and expectations for staff. Teaching teams have to create their own supervision plan for where their kids go. And so everybody has to have, each team has to have their own supervision plan. There's social emotional training for students, basically teaching of behaviors to try to avoid, to be proactive and avoid future behaviors. And so we're really going to emphasize strategies on promoting effective redirection of non-compliant students. We're going to add some walkie-talkies so that staff can easier get help if we're dealing with a non-compliant student. And 1 time a month, we're going to do check-ins with Head Start staff on procedures to make sure they remember how to request help if they're dealing with a difficult behavioral situation with a student. And then we're going to do a refresher training on student supervision. Attachment C is Head Start health and safety guidelines that were put out in 24-25. So those are the current health and safety guidelines that Head Start uses. And then attachment D is their description of active supervision at a glance. There are 6 things that staff should do to correctly perform active supervision when working with students.
Question, Mrs. Adams?
Yes, on attachment A, it has my name under the board chairperson. That should be Mary Motter.
It was, and we did correct it. I
Okay,
think
great.
that this came from Head Start,
Okay.
and for some reason they didn't have the correct
All
name, but
right,
that's
thank you.
been corrected since.
Other questions? I just told her to put your name on everything, Yolanda.
I think it's because it was on the original, the 5-year grant, but I did correct it.
All right. Thank you. And moving on to the new course proposals.
Yep, for
Yes.
Lakeview, K8, this will be Ms. Tyndall and Mr. Creel, Mr. Cosman.
Good evening. Mr. Creel and Mr. Cosman are going to join me at the table here. Lakeview K8 Academy is proposing 11 new courses to their instruction. In the packet, you will see we are creating 3 pathways: engineering, manufacturing, computer science, and biomedical sciences, to enhance their STEM education. The packet has great detail on each of the 11 courses that are going to be added, and also an overview of how the 3-year plan to integrate these courses will be rolled out at Lakeview. Questions?
Looks really exciting. I kind of skimmed, but from what I see, this is really in alignment, with being a feeder school. Now, I'm just curious about all the equipment and the different types of things you're bringing in and how you're going to retrofit classes to offer all these wonderful programs.
Oh, absolutely. The good news is at the middle school and elementary level, a lot of the work is going to be in consumables and tools. We've already ordered the tools, and we're using the existing tools that were there as well. So that we're not going to need a lot more equipment beyond 3D printers, and I was too excited. I've already ordered those too.
Out of their existing budget, their school budget.
Yes, need nothing from the district for this.
These 11 courses have 0 cost to the district.
What's that? Yes, ma'am.
So these 11 courses have 0 cost to the district.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mrs. Landry,
I'm excited too.
anybody else excited?
Well,
Mrs.
count me in
Stevens.
on that excitement.
Mr. Creel, what's the preferred name of your school?
All right, so to explain my outburst at the principal meeting today, it was only to make you laugh. But there has been a thing where we're getting called Little Lakeview. And I find that to be a bit of a derogation. No, it's fine. You're good.
Overall, you can see a lot of work was put into this proposal. Mr. Cosman is the scheduler kind of piece to this puzzle. It's going to really enhance opportunities for those kids.
Yes, Mrs. Schmeling.
Have we seen an increase in enrollment at all for Little Lakeview?
So I feel like our enrollment numbers for the size of the building would be around 900 plus K4. That's good for that facility. So we'll be able to maintain that for sure, but an increase from where we currently are, I don't see that being the direction we'd go.
I do have one question, just how these different things just kind of spread out in the curriculum for the different age groups and stuff?
Yes. So one of the 11 courses is elementary STEM. That's a special that's designed for our K through 5 kids. It's 90 minutes a week where they'll get education in Lego bricks. It varies by the grade level. They'll also work with small hand tools, and they'll get some coding with either Indy 8s or BBots, where they'll get rudimentary coding, like you want to go forward this many times inside. It's going through a maze essentially. The other courses are going to be our middle school electives, and over the course of 3 years, we will install courses that will be considered prerequisites for the next grade level. So next year, our 7th and 8th graders will be having very similar courses because they'll be completely new to them. And then by the second year, you'll see some differences, and the third will be a full install.
It's really great, and I'm just excited because I know that we live in a technology world, and I can't keep up with it. So I count on my grands, and they help me a lot. Yeah, one of them hooked my TV up, so all on her own.
Yes.
And just to speak to Ms. Schmaling's question, I do think it'll be difficult to determine any new interest until this coming fall when we have our choice window open again, because our changes happened after that window had closed for the upcoming school year. So that's more like October through December is when those meetings are held to share what you've changed and enhanced, and then receive your new interest.
And along those lines, did we ever determine what percentage we're going to have for the neighborhood kids to enroll? Did we
that was left as an option for the board to consider, and we suggested late spring or summer as a potential time to have some of the more relevant data so that you could have kind of a well-rounded amount to determine that, and whether or not you want a set number, a certain percentage. You would have to establish what the boundaries are that you want in that area. In just looking at what we've had in the past, you're at almost 30% of that school has enrollments of what was the previous Lincoln Middle School boundary. But again, that wasn't kind of a, it was oblong, as it wasn't kind of a clear rectangular boundary area. So if you wanted to come in and say, well, we're going to set this from 22nd Ave east to the lake, and then 75th Street to 60th Street or something like that, that's kind of clean, and say, okay, this is the boundary area. Or we could look at 1 mile radius or 1.5. So
boundary area for 30% or something, whatever. I'm not going to be on the board, but I think it's super important that we really look at that. That was one of the reasons I wanted.
Yeah, you have options.
Add to the movement of this whole STEM Lakeview K through 8 was to include the Lincoln boundary, potentially those families that wanted to enroll.
Yeah. If left to chance, we have seen a higher attendance from the region closer to the school. And so if we did nothing, I think we would see a lot of kids from that neighborhood applying and getting in, but they wouldn't necessarily have a higher percentage of getting accepted to the school. Or so you could, watching to see how it looks and the history of like how many kids from around that area attended K-Tech East or something like that. There's all things that we could look at to see, do we feel like we need to improve this, or this is happening naturally? Those are all things we could look at.
Thank you.
All right, good talk.
I especially enjoyed meeting your neighbor. All right, now we have policy 5330.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I'm going to be briefly covering in the interest of time, but certainly if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. There's 3 policies. These are all basically driven from some regulatory piece that's introduced, and just to go through those. So the first one is from the student assignment to schools. This one was last revisited, in 2008, and so several things have taken place that are already have been enacted or are current practices that we just wanted to clean up the language and align it to what is the results of the right sizing, where the board established new boundary locations for elementary and middle school, as well as what the current practices are for allowing students to sign up for a choice option, still with having approximately a third of our students attending the school that's not their boundary school. And as Tanya said, we have that choice window and adding that in there and when students make those selections. We did move one window of option, and that is the parent initiated transfer request window. Typically that's been in early January, and when we look at our annual timeline, it's harder to discern the available number of seats that parents could request at a non-boundary school. So that's being moved to March. So after kind of staffings are determined, and then we're able to measure those options of staffing and potential seats against board policy. So that should clean it up a little bit more. And then, reinforcing what the parents and community rights are always to their boundary school, and other options just to support them. But basically, this is already in place. That it was just to clean up the policy and align it to the results of right sizing and a cleaner timeline. Happy
Okay.
to answer any questions.
Questions? All right. Let's move on to the policy 6456.
So graduation requirements is one of our more frequently revisited one, and similar to last ones, this one is due to Wisconsin Act 60, which reinforces something that was put in place as a recommendation, but now it's more of a requirement. Basically, the state and Wisconsin, and certainly not alone, but wanting to put in more of a kind of a foundational personal financial literacy course compared to just an economics course. So this one has to be grounded in certain standards related to financial literacy, debt management, credit acquisition, things that obviously should prepare young adults as they proceed through life in learning these basic skills around personal financial literacy and hopefully being successful. We did also add some additional language for a group of students that the kind of the term that's out there and has existed nationally for a while called SLIFE, SLIFE, for students with limited or interrupted formal education. As we're starting to see more of those cases, come to Kenosha, and certainly again not isolated to just this area, but these are students for any number of scenarios where we are required to educate children and have that option for them. And it's hard when they don't come from a formal educational environment in any particular area of the world or for any particular reason. And so obviously our stands are to try and have those, but you're working with, South American countries that work on trimesters and opposite seasons, or you have refugees from war-torn areas, or you have people that their formal education stopped at second grade and they haven't had anything for 6 years and then they move here. And so to obviously work with them in these services, and this just outlines it that if they're at the high school age, that kind of a formal plan is developed to try and ascertain what, if any, competencies they've already acquired that we can validate, so that you don't want the scenario that the kid's 18 or the student's 17 and a half or 18 and say, okay, you have to start at 0 and be here for another 4 years, which won't exist for them. And then they just disengage. So there's things that we could then implement, but it's through a formalized plan, similar to like an IEP or a 504, but one in which that we want to make sure that it's developed and understood from the student side, the parent side, and the staff side.
Questions for Chris?
That's a really good definition. That what you last described was the SLIFE?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in there. In the
Yep,
policy.
I see. Thanks.
Yep. Good on that one.
Okay.
All right, the final one is student awards and scholarships. So this is driven by two initiatives that the state established partnerships with UW Systems. This is the Wisconsin Guarantee Admissions Program. This exists for districts that when students complete their 11th grade year, that we are determined that any high school that has more than 15 full-time students, they're to establish what the class ranking is for the top 5 and 10%. So this puts us into play. This was through WASB and policy guidance that they expect these to be within our local policy just to define this practice. Unfortunately, the timeline that DPI and the state has put out there for notification with the UW system doesn't align to when our regular proper year ends. So they want the data like in like around June 10th, and our school year is still going on, or June 11th. So there's that summer notification. So we get it kind of on the second round notification, which would be kind of the late August, early September time, because technically summer school does count for the remainder of that year. So you could have some position shifting, but the reason it's coming out now instead of a couple months ago, we had to wait for some guidance and some clarification on this legislative act that pertains to identification and determination of those positions, how to break ties, and really you can only use student GPA. So we have this outlined in here. And so the simplest 30-second example I'd give you is that if you had a school that only had 100 students and you needed the top 10%, it would be 10 students and top 5. UW-Madison gets to be a little bit more selective, and so you're guaranteed admission for those UW schools, except Madison if you're in the top 10%, and if you have to be in the top 5% to get to the Madison one. Couple of kind of asterisks with this. One, it only is guaranteed admission up to the point of early admission window, which is different for each UW school. So parents would have to and students would have to check that out on their own. The example we looked at last year, UW Madison's was around mid-November. And second, they get guaranteed admission to the school, but they do not get any guaranteed admission to any particular program or major area. They still have to apply to, medical college or paralegal or any of those other particular areas. So it's to help drive enrollment for that. But so if you had a junior class of 100 and you need to determine the top 10%, it's 10 kids. But if you had 125, you can't grab 12 and a half kids, and so they had to get clarification that we have to round down to the whole student. So it'd be 12 kids, and then we just only use GPA. So we don't round up GPA. We go to the absolute numbers just to identify those students. So we will process all of this internally. The state will get their file usually around early mid-August, and then the students and families are notified straight from the UW system. So it's out of our hands at that point. So,
Any other questions for Chris? Okay, hearing none, brings us to our last item right here, Mental Health Awareness Month. And who? Mrs.
that's
Landry said she'll read it.
Okay, very good.
We've reached the end of our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We don't need a motion. We just adjourned. Do we have any views and comments? Okay.